She arrived at the edge of the settlement as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky bleeding in streaks of red and gold. Every step she took stirred the dust beneath her worn boots, but the weight on her shoulders felt heavier than the bags she carried. The town behind her was loud and cold, a place of judgment and desperation, a place where she had learned that survival often demanded surrendering pieces of oneself. She had traded warmth for safety before, a decision that left her spirit frayed and her heart aching with a hollow emptiness that no comfort could fill. The Comanche land stretched before her, endless and untamed, a wilderness that promised nothing and yet whispered of freedom. She had heard stories of a solitary man who lived deep in these plains, a man whose kindness was buried beneath layers of solitude and grief. Some called him a recluse, others a ghost. But to her, he was a chance, fragile, uncertain, yet tantalizing in its possibility. When she first saw him, he was tending a fire outside a small, sturdy cabin, smoke curling up like a tentative greeting. His hair was long and dark, his eyes pools of quiet sorrow and enduring patience. He watched her approach, silent, and she felt herself shrinking under the weight of his gaze. "I don't want trouble," she said, her voice trembling, cracking with the vulnerability she had carried for so long. He nodded once, a simple gesture that carried no judgment. "Then don't bring it here," he replied softly. His voice was like the wind through the plains, steady, calm, almost melodic in its restraint. He made no move to stop her, no question of her past, no demand for explanation. For the first time, someone simply let her be. Days passed, and she learned the rhythms of this new life. She woke to the birds' chorus, the scent of pine and earth filling her lungs, the sun warming her face. The man, whose name she learned was Dakota, showed her how to find water, how to track game, how to read the sky for storms. At first, the lessons were practical, mere survival skills, but slowly, he taught her patience, resilience, and the quiet power of self-reliance. She watched the way he moved through the world with a careful respect, how he treated each living thing with thoughtfulness, and it stirred something long buried in her, a sense that life could be gentle, even after cruelty. At night, they sat by the fire, the stars spilling across the sky in an infinite tapestry. She spoke little at first, but one evening the dam broke. She told him everything, how she had traded herself for shelter, how betrayal had followed her like a shadow, how loneliness had been both a cage and a comfort. She expected scorn, pity, maybe silence, but Dakota listened, his eyes never leaving hers, his expression calm, accepting. When she finished, he simply said, "You survived. That is not shameful. That is strength." Something shifted then, a fragile bond forming, not of convenience, not of necessity, but of understanding. She began to laugh again, small, hesitant at first, then more freely, like water returning to a dried riverbed. Dakota shared stories of his own losses, of a family taken too soon, of dreams abandoned to duty and circumstance. Their histories intertwined in the quiet way that grief often does, connecting two wounded souls who had almost forgotten how to hope. Seasons changed. The cabin became a home, the wilderness a sanctuary. She discovered joy in the mundane, the rhythm of chores, the taste of a freshly caught fish, the brush of his hand against hers as they moved through the tall grass. And in that simplicity, love began to bloom, quiet, steady, a light that did not demand perfection, only presence. But life in the plains was never without challenge. A harsh winter swept through the land, testing their resilience. Food ran low, sickness crept in, and old fears clawed at her resolve. One night she awoke to Dakota coughing violently, his face pale in the firelight. Panic surged through her, and for the first time she felt truly powerless. She ran to him, wrapping him in blankets, tending his fevered body, praying for the wilderness to spare them. And as she worked, she realized something profound. She was no longer the girl who had traded herself for survival. She was a partner, a caretaker, a force of life in a world that demanded endurance. When spring finally returned, Dakota emerged from the fever stronger than before, his eyes reflecting gratitude and something deeper, love, unspoken yet undeniable. They walked together across the plains, hands entwined, feeling the pulse of life in each blade of grass, each bird in flight, each whisper of wind. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with its familiar fire, Dakota stopped and turned to her. You gave me a home, a heart, and a future, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She shook her head, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. No, she whispered. You gave me the same. And in that moment, under the vast, unending sky, they understood the truth of survival and love, that it was not in surrendering to the world, but in finding another soul to walk with you, to bear the weight of loss and joy together, to turn pain into understanding and loneliness. They had each other, and that was enough to make the world whole. The plains stretched endlessly before them, but they no longer feared its emptiness. They had each other, and that was enough to make the world whole. The years that followed were not without hardship, but they carried the lessons of those early days like armor for the soul. She grew strong, not hardened, resilient, not calloused. Dakota remained her anchor, his steady presence a constant reminder that life, no matter how cruel, could also be tender, generous, and redemptive. Their love was quiet but unbreakable, forged in hardship, nurtured in understanding, and celebrated in the small, profound moments of everyday life. And when she looked back on the life she had left behind, the shadows of the settlement, the bargains struck in desperation, she no longer felt shame or fear. Instead, she felt gratitude for the pain that had guided her to this place, to this man, to this life. She had discovered that the heart's capacity to heal and love was boundless, that redemption was possible not through grand gestures, but through simple acts of courage, empathy, and steadfastness. The sun set again over the plains, gold and crimson spilling across the horizon. She sat by the fire, Dakota's hand in hers, listening to the wind sing through the trees, and she smiled, a full, unwavering smile, knowing that she had found more than shelter. She had found home, heart, and the unshakable certainty that even the loneliest of journeys could lead to a future bright with hope.